Welcome to an exciting new episode of Mic'd Up with Mas. This is our monthly podcast series where we feature the best of mobile experts from the industry to talk about user acquisition and more. Today we have with us Steven Sesar, who's the managing director of Just Slide Media, a Los Angeles-based digital agency, and Ankit Rawal, senior director of sales and marketing at Mas, powered by Affle. Welcome to you, Ankit and Steven.
Hi Steve, welcome to Mic'd Up with Mas. Great to have you here. As we were discussing before the recording that Just Slide Media, JSM and Mas has been working for almost a year, and our partnership has really grown strength to strength the last 1 year. So happy to have you on board.
Yeah, thanks for having me on the show.
Thanks, Steve. Why don't you start talking a little bit about yourself and the organization Just Slide Media?
Yeah, sure. So Just Slide Media is far more than just a traditional digital marketing agency. In fact, we really think of ourselves as more of a digital transformation company where we enable companies traditionally in offline digital categories to develop and deploy successful digital online strategies and rapidly grow their business from a digital perspective. Our collective team is a team of well-regarded entrepreneurs. Most have actually built their own companies. It's a team of developers, product, marketing, analysts, and we try to develop products and solutions for our clients to grow their businesses, leveraging our actual growth marketing platform that we've developed and cultivated over 15 years, really, to be able to get their products to market and grow their businesses even quicker.
Interesting. I think what's different from some of the other agency partners we work is you are full stack, you have a very strong technical background, and you're working with some of the large conglomerates, trying to help them navigate this whole buzz around digital transformation. And I think what has really happened is COVID really accelerated it, right? So things changes which need to happen in 5 years are now happening in, say, last 18 months. So curious from your vantage point, especially you're in the most evolved market in US, how do you see this whole digital transformation playing out, especially post-COVID, if I can say that way?
Yeah, I mean, you don't have to be a genius to realize that we've really moved ahead by 10 years because of the lockdown, where you have traditional categories, whether it be insurance, in our case, telecommunications, businesses that have traditionally really been about offline, rapidly accelerating their digital initiatives and moving online as quickly as possible. So we've seen different strategies with one of the largest insurance providers in the Southeast Asian markets test all different kinds of concepts during the lockdown period, right? Everything from trying to sell insurance policies inside an app, actually using voice and video, because there's different types of regulation in the different countries in the markets on whether or not you have to be in person to sell an insurance product, or has a regulatory kind of eased off that burden and allowed people to actually sell policies inside an app or on a website through technology. So you've actually seen that through this lockdown period. You've seen different kinds of deployments of different types of direct consumer applications from insurance type of companies in a way that they really never had thought about it pre-COVID. In the US, what we're actually seeing, we work with a major telecommunications client, right? That industry, I'd say, is probably about 99% offline, where telephones and plans, certainly in the postpaid space, are typically sold at either brand-owned stores or national retail stores. And now what you're seeing, the client that we're working with, they really have a digital-first strategy unfolding in the last year since they've acquired their business, and throwing tens of millions of dollars into the build-out of an entire technology stack that will enable them to be far more efficient in the digital space, because that's really where the future is being and kind of accelerated because of the COVID lockdown. So we're seeing it across the world in, again, traditional verticals that otherwise were sold offline, now rapidly transforming in various incarnations through digital. as a mode of efficiency.
No, absolutely. I think what you rightly hit the nail on the head, talking about how data and tech and even, if I can put it, demography will be driving this decade, right? So this decade will become decade rather than which is driven by data and digital. But curious, I think you're also very well poised because you are having clients both in North America as well as in Asia, right? So curious, can you compare and contrast how either consumer behavior or how clients behave differently in these two markets, say in Southeast Asia for one of your insurance client versus the telecom client you work in North America, as you mentioned?
Yeah, there's obviously a lot of differences. There's no question. It's certainly for a team like ours, which is based in North America, trying to service Southeast Asian markets. Some obvious differences in trying to market them on behalf of our clients. Obviously, right, language is going to be a significant one. It's kind of an obvious one, but some of the challenges around and nuances around language. It's not just a matter of translation, but it's nuance in what the actual words mean or how certain phrases are going to be used in the market and in each of those countries. There's just nuances. So it tends to be a lot of partnerships with our clients themselves to understand how we can position certain products, certain feature sets that are going to resonate in one country versus another country. So that's always a challenge. We are forced to do the best that we can to promote, a health and wellness type of product and application in Southeast Asian markets as well. And so you also have nuances around images and what images and the cultural components around how images are interpreted for things like, food, for example, where we would think something looks pretty darn appetizing. Depending on the marketplace, it may not be the case. So we end up partnering very closely, again, with our clients to help make that determination and kind of look through the nuance of what will be well adopted in the market. And then I'd say the one that kind of overshadows everything that we do really comes down to payment method adoption. So a lot of what we do isn't just about marketing an application for the sake of getting installs and registrations, but it's really about driving subscription. And so what you'll notice is that in certain markets, payment methods are adopted in dramatically different ways, and you have to acknowledge that. Whether you think you're going to have higher adoption rates of a particular app in, say, Indonesia versus what you're going to get in the Philippines, where Philippines adoption of certain types of payment methods are much further ahead than what you're going to find in Indonesia. So all of that kind of factors into your expectations on how successful your campaigns are going to be. And in the U.S. market, right, it's a completely different thing. As a North American-based company, being able to go ahead and market, it's a mature market in and of itself, but we don't have the language consideration nearly as much, obviously, and we kind of understand the vernacular, the imagery, the cultural aspects of the U.S. market, so it makes it much easier to go ahead and market. But also, to your point, it's a very mature market. So the adoption of payment methods is far, far, far further along. And so we don't have to really have the same type of expectation setting that we do when we enter the Southeast Asian markets, because it's been so well adopted from a payment method standpoint.
No, absolutely. I think, and I'll give you one more interesting dichotomy between Asia or Southeast Asia, India versus North America, is what I call the banyan tree versus the redwood tree. So if you think in India or even in Southeast Asia, we'll have this whole concept of super app. So whether it is Grab, which is trying to become an app for not just ride hailing, food delivery, and now financial payments. Similarly, you have here, for example, Zomato, which just went public. You can not just order food, you can check out restaurants as well as you can order table here. Order like if you're going for in-dine, you can do table bookings from just one app. So they are like banyan tree. They try to do too many things at one go and they try to become like a super app. Versus if you compare and contrast to the US, they are more like this redwood tree. So you have a Yelp, an Open Table, and a DoorDash doing three different things, and all of them are unicorns. But they do 10x better than the others, and that's why they grow as high as a redwood tree. versus in Asia, whether it is India or Southeast Asia, you see everybody's trying to become a super app. What has also happened, for example, in China, with whether it is with Alipay or VPay. So I think again that is very interesting. I see a big dichotomy between North America and Asia of a banyan tree versus a redwood tree.
Yeah, that's interesting. You bring that up because that has been a very hot topic for us. To your point, our client in Southeast Asia, we have multiple clients, but our largest client in Southeast Asia has taken on the position going back 3 to 4 years that the super app is the proper strategy in the region, in the market. Whereas to your point, we are far more familiar with what we call single-use app in the US markets, which has always been wildly successful. Now, we don't think that is necessarily a market adoption reason as to why that seems to be the case in the region. We believe it's kind of it's an outlet from what people have perceived as been successful in the market. So in China, obviously Alipay, they're complementing, and there's a variety of other apps in Southeast Asia that do have a super app concept, but they all started with a key feature. And I think a lot of the companies making decisions about to take on a super app or a single-use app approach have falsely assumed that super app is being adopted versus the killer feature that those super apps started with. And so if I'm starting with a feature, a killer feature like payments adoption, and everyone in the market is going to go ahead and have already adopted it, you can then extend on features to ultimately get to the point over a 3-4 year term where you actually end up with a super app. Super app wasn't the strategy from our point of view. Super app was the end result of a company that had created a great single-use app and was able to complement it with a set of features over time. Right? It's no different than really if Facebook decides to launch Facebook marketplaces. Facebook has a lot of features, as a web company in terms of what they now provide, but it didn't start as that. It became that. And now you would assume that Facebook is more of kind of a super app in terms of what it can do because it has so many different components to it, whether it be Facebook groups and Facebook Marketplace and the whole host of things that Facebook offers. So, we never really thought about it, or we don't think it should have been thought about as a strategy. We think it's an outcome of what started as a very successful single-use app. So in every case, we recommend going down the single-use app perspective. Higher install rates, higher adoption rates, better targeting capability, versus trying to be all things to all people. It makes for a very difficult adoption, and we've seen that kind of play out with the clients that we have in the region.
Got it. Let me push you a little further on this. So, because you're acquiring users for, say, 2 different brands, one in North America, one in Southeast Asia, curious from a customer acquisition strategy, do you see any difference? What channels you use, what methodologies you use, say Southeast Asia versus what you do for your clients in North America?
To be totally transparent, not really. Our approach to it really, at the end of the day, is the same. Now granted, most of our clients are very Android centric versus iOS centric. And in that world, we leverage kind of, all the traditional, big name networks. We're going to go after Google. We're going to try Facebook. Facebook's going to have good quality. And then we're going to extend with you guys and some other networks to kind of push the envelope a little bit further. And I don't think that strategy is really that different at the end of the day. The way that we market the products are certainly going to have nuances. The copy that we use, the imagery that you use, those are always going to be nuanced and different by market. But at the end of the day, the strategy and deployment, we think we have a pretty good methodology that we go through, get it out there. We cast a wide net. That's always our philosophy. And then we kind of hone and optimize over time to find kind of the right nuance, the right setup and structure and campaign structure and networks that we're running with, and kind of rein that in over time. But that's kind of the strategy. Cast a wide net, optimize it over time, and it's kind of the same. It's rinse and repeat, and it's kind of been the same strategy for the last 15 years, to be honest.
Got it. Yeah, what I call my team is that solve by iteration and then scale by repetition. So once you know what works, then you double down on that strategy and on that channel.
Yeah, but what I will say, and whether it applies the same way, because we don't just market apps, right? We actually have a pretty significant business on web as well. And we've been doing this a very long time. So what we've actually found has always been wildly successful, and it's totally antithetical to what traditionally our clients try to do. Our clients think they know who their customer is, and what they do is they first deploy their marketing strategies towards targeting what they assume to be, in their hypothesis, their target audience. We take on, and when doing that, right, they're probably missing an audience that they never even thought they would have, because they were so laser focused on who they believed their clients to be. We don't do that. And by the way, that's also going to cost a lot more in terms of targeting, so on and so forth. We cast a wide net. We never assume that we know who our clients are, and we'll go ahead and deploy our campaigns across the largest networks possible, and we'll refine it over time. Once we deploy it across everybody, now we know who our client or customer is. We know where the higher conversion rates are. And it just so happens when you're doing that, you're typically run of network, so it ends up costing you less anyways. But once you actually have an idea of who your client is, then you start refining it. But we never start there. We never start with the assumption that we know who our customer is going to be. We always cast the wide net first.
Got it. Interesting. One of the other things which you mentioned, which actually is a segue for something I wanted to discuss, is the hot potato around Android versus iOS. As you rightly mentioned that Asia, Southeast Asia is all Android first market, but obviously iOS is much dominant in North America. And now I think we are 2-3 months down the road with this whole new ATT framework, iOS 14.5. Adoption rates are near 95%, especially in the US. So curious, how has that shaken up your GTMs in North America? Reporting, as I hear from our partners, is still a mess. So how are you navigating this whole pal of iOS 14.5?
Yeah, I mean, again, I kind of alluded to it. I mean, lucky for us, even in the US, the majority of our clients are heavy Android focused. We have a fintech client that's been ramping massively. Now one of the top in the financial category. And most of that growth has occurred. I'd say before the last couple of weeks, most of that growth had actually occurred in Android specifically. And so we were very unimpacted by the iOS changes. Nevertheless, all of our clients still have iOS versions of their apps, and it's caused a lot of consternation, and it has proved challenging. There's no getting around it. And really feel in a lot of ways that we're just kind of running blind at this point, without a whole lot of explanation. It's been difficult, but really for us, it's such a small part of the business. We haven't spent too much time worrying about it, and kind of waiting to see how things shake out, and see if there is other tools and technology and strategies that can kind of overcome it. But it hasn't been our focus, so it just really hasn't really negatively impacted us so far.
Got it. Yeah, because from what I hear from some of our gaming clients, which were one of the most heavy impacted category, it's been a bloodbath, and like the pricing for scan networks versus non-scan traffic has just skyrocketed. Nobody knows. There's one conversion value at such small scale. And for certain categories like gaming, where you don't have that many events, right? Because there are only those whales which pay in-app purchases, all your modeling has gone into the bin. So it's been a challenging time for that category, particularly if you're also running re-engagement, retargeting campaigns.
Right. Again, we've just been, for all intents and purposes, unaffected by it, just because of the focus of our clients. Now, I will say, part of our recommendation and strategy, depending on the client, did take into account the fact that there would be limited visibility on what people do in iOS. So the recommendation had been deploy Android first, get an understanding of what's working, what's not, before you go down that path. And so, we're kind of
curious, are you seeing clients shifting budgets from iOS to Android then?
Yes, yeah. I mean, without question, but kind of, again, part of it was we knew it was coming. And so the budgets start even before the deployment. We had already made recommendations to double down on Android as a result of that. And so they're already there. And so they've been less affected by it by moving towards iOS as a result of that until, again, right, the dust clears, there's a clear path forward on how we're going to go ahead and measure and monitor. So it was almost strategic from that point of view in terms of recommendation. So therefore, we're just not spending that much time really in iOS at this point, and never have. So yeah, I mean, so are they shifting budgets? The budget's already started in Android for the most part.
Got it. Interesting. Cool. I think let's change tracks a little bit now. And again, as you rightly mentioned, and we all know that North America is the most mature, evolved market. And as we close this year, and you'll see a lot of what to expect in 22 kind of trends popping up in the next couple of months. Curious from your vantage point, where do you see the world moving, especially around mobile user acquisition? Do you think discussions and discourse around incrementality or multi-touch attribution, do you think these things will become fad, or they are now forever?
Incrementality, actually, to be totally transparent, don't really understand the context for the use of it. We typically think about it from the perspective of, multivariate testing, trying to improve performance on an incremental basis. We don't play in that space. We're about, meaning we spend most of our time dramatically improving upon our current clients' infrastructure. And so we have step changes, not incremental changes in what we do. And in that world, we're not just incrementally modifying and improving performance just from ads. We're helping get involved in the product design and development to help their user flows and their user journeys to drive conversions that they care most about. So in some cases, it's not just about install, right? In most cases, it's going to be about improving subscription conversion rates. And therefore, we're looking at step change modifications inside the products and the applications that will allow them to improve their conversion rates and then pour more budget into the marketing side of the business. So again, we're full stack. So we're able to play a very meaningful role in the redesign, redeployment, and user journeys that our clients have, all for the purpose of growth. But you got to have the conversion rates up and to the right before you decide to go ahead and spend more on the marketing budget. So we don't really think about it in terms of incrementality. I'm not even sure if that's the right context. Ours is all about step change growth. And so wherever we think we can highly lever your growth, we will spend time and attention to that. In some cases, it's really about, okay, we deployed on Google as an example, and now they want a step change in growth by going ahead and deploying on more networks. Well, that's easy for us to do, right? We can do that just by partnering with you guys on growing and expanding the app's awareness across thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, tens of thousands of apps and websites. In other cases, the step change is going to come from the product changes that we make inside the app. So it kind of depends, but we never think of incrementality. It's always about step change.
Got it.
And then your other point was on attribution. So attribution is always going to be a hot button for me. I've been in the space, the digital space, for 16, 17 years at this point. I'm one of the gray hairs in the space, and every time people talk about attribution, I just think it's bullshit. I'll be honest with you, candid.
Okay.
Right. So you've got an entire industry, everyone from the clients and brands to agencies. Everyone wants to take credit for everything. It doesn't matter what it is, right? Agencies always want to prove their worth. And so the way that they typically show that they're worthwhile to something, they'll come up with some nonsensical, sorry to say it, bullshit method of attribution. And they'll claim, and you also see it at the networks, right? Facebook over time has to prove out that Facebook is in fact valuable. And just because Facebook doesn't deliver transactions, they like to go ahead and convey things like view-through attribution. I mean, this stuff has been there for God knows how long, but the reality is something like a view-through attribution is just utter bullshit. And everyone knows that, but Facebook has to show value, right, in their case. And then the agencies have to show their value. So they're fully incentivized, just like Facebook, to create some nonsensical method of showing value through changing attribution. But at the end of the day, if you actually just look at what has always been the same method of attribution that has worked very successfully for performance-driven campaigns, which is going to be last touch, not much has really changed. And so one of the things that and I'm telling you, this is a hot topic for us. We think about it all the time because we think so much of it is just absolute and utter nonsense. And it's because there are motivations, whether it's the agency or the networks themselves, to try to prove value. So one of the things that we've always done.
Let me just give you a counter view, which I hear from Facebook and other view through attributions, especially with attributed networks. They say that people don't get up thinking they want to download any app, right? There has to be multiple touch points. You have to make them aware, and this has always been the case, right? Whether it was TV, whether it was print, you need a multiple 4-7 touch points across different channels, different times of the day, and only then somebody would do the derive action. So their argument is, then why do you want to base everything on last touch or last click in our case rather than a multi-touch model? And that's how it has been working, for example, for media mix modeling and a lot of CPG clients like the Nikes and the Unilevers of the world.
Yeah, it's bullshit. That's exactly what I'm saying. They're going to make any type of claim and any storyline. That's just so we look at impulse purchase, right, and a hard sell, right? That's the only two ways to really think about the world.
Okay.
I'd say 99% of what happens online with something as simple as, we'll just talk about an app install. That's an impulse, right? At that point in time, and I'll give it, you've got basically 5 seconds, if that, where someone has made a very tactical decision. You grab their interest on an ad. You've solicited something in their mind to compel them to go to the page. They've spent the time and effort reading it. The fact that there is such a small hindrance to do an install, to me, suggests it's actually the ultimate impulse buy, because there's nothing to buy, right? All I need to do is go ahead and install an app. So there's literally no hindrance to do that. This is not a hard sell. This does not require me to be promoted about that app through like all these different channels over time. It's all based on impulse. And we talk about impulse buys all the time, even in the case of a purchase. But just in the case of an install, this isn't like a multifaceted sell that has to happen and sell me to do the install through like search and through display and through all these channels. And it takes me like a week or a year to make a decision on installing the app. It's the ultimate impulse buy, that if you found it compelling in that moment that I was actually thinking through that particular service, I'm going to go ahead, because there's no hindrance, to go ahead and do the install. So I would even make the case that, if you're talking about purchase, or if you're talking about something like, buying a new car at the other end of the continuum, buying a new car is not it's not a simple impulse buy. It's a complex sale. I may want to go test drive it. I'm evaluating a variety of different products. I'm looking at the Tesla. I'm looking at the, depending on who you are, if you're highly successful, you're looking at the Lamborghini, you're understanding all the statistics around those cars. You're trying to, read some of the reviews and going through it. From that point of view, I don't disagree with it. But when you go to the other end of the continuum, you're just talking about a straight up app. It's an impulse buy, and that can happen in seconds. And there really is no need for multi-use attribution. I mean, there just isn't. I mean, I can't tell you how many apps that I've looked at and thought about installing, 6 months ago. I don't even remember what they were, but there was some campaign that put me over the edge much, much later. And in fact, I didn't even know that I ever saw it 6 months ago. I just know at this point, at this time, my interest level is such that I'm willing to go ahead and pull the trigger on it, because there's something so compelling about that campaign, but also where my headspace is today. My headspace today wants to go ahead and install Uber, it has nothing to do with the fact that I saw ads about Uber like 6 months ago. It has to do with, like, I didn't have Uber. I'm sitting on a side road somewhere, and right now is the time that I want to go ahead and get a car. That's what drove it. It's not even a question. It had nothing to do with like previous brand awareness or any other type of campaign that tried to get me to switch over. So, we think it's all bullshit. Last touch is always believed to be the best from a performance standpoint. There's no question. But what I will also say is we have other factors along the way that we look at it. So it may not be, so in the case of web, for example, we don't look at click. We don't look at view through. We always think there's a component of a registration that is really about how we determine, whether or not that was the campaign that ultimately drove that user into, the service offering, some kind of real intent at the end of the day. So a click is a click intent. We don't really think a click is intent. We think of a registration as intent. And even if the service that I have is subscription based, we won't go click. We'll go based on the original real intent, which we think was through registration. So it kind of depends, but that's probably the only distinguishing characteristic that we think about from an attribution standpoint is real intent, not just click, and then view through we think is just nonsense.
Got it. Interesting. I hope folks from the SANS world are listening. Cool. I think one of the other, and before I let you go, one of the last question I wanted to check the trend which you're actually living and leading is that whole full stack, right? So if you think, if I rewind back in the last decade, they were very focused agencies and partners, someone only doing media, somebody only doing creative, somebody only doing TV and print. And now what we're seeing is the world is becoming full stack, right? Like ironically, the Accentures and the consulting firms are also moving into the marketing advertising space because they say that unless you don't have the right business strategy, downstream marketing strategy and advertising strategy will not fall in place. And everybody's talking about full stack. So, and you are living and breathing that trend. So curious, how do you see panning that out in North America? And then how do you see this rippling into different parts of the world?
Full stack. So I guess it depends on what someone's definition is of full stack. From our point of view, we really look at it two ways, right? So there's the marketing side, right? We know how to do that. We're best in class. But really what it comes down to, because the two go hand in hand on the product side, right? That user experience on onboarding of the product, but even deeper than that, the feature set that is built into the product and what are the value propositions around that. So the definition of the product and the requirements must be tailor-made in such a way that that you can extract a high-performing value proposition that is going to work in marketing. So from full stack, it's the entire architecture and definition of the product itself that we get involved in. We also get involved in the tactical user journeys of the product. And then we take on the marketing spend and optimization as part of that. So we think of everything from the design, the architecture of the product, to the actual tactical development of the product, to the paid marketing. That's our full stack. We think it's the only way to do it. It's the only way I've ever done it. I'm now working on my fourth startup. At every point, marketing and product are intertwined inside our organizations. They're not separate groups, to your point. I mean, it gets so dramatic with, you have a brand, you have creative, you have all these different organizations at typical corporations. Startups don't have the luxury and also know that you've got to move in line with each other. And so our marketing and our product teams are virtually one and the same. And that's how we treat our solutions creation with each of our clients. If you want us involved, we're going to have not just an opinion, but we're going to have our entire team involved in the product architecture and deployment. Because if you want us to be successful marketers, right, we need to have some skin in the game when it comes to the product itself and help design it in such a way that the propositions will be incredibly compelling, but the user journeys as well will be seamless and optimized to the point that we can drive a significantly higher conversion rate by modifying that side of the business and that continuum as well. So like even as simple as the marketing message that you see on a landing page needs to, or I should say on the advertisement, needs to flow through the entire user journey to ultimately have the highest potential conversion rate. So, full stack for us, yeah, we're involved in it. We're a growth marketing team. And I think what you end up hearing is full stack also means growth marketing. What growth marketing means really is you're getting involved in every single component of the user journey to help deliver step change growth as opposed to what more of a traditional digital agency can do with just ads.
Exactly. I think as you rightly said, it's a tango between product and marketing, and all pieces of the puzzle have to come together for a wow user experience. So absolutely. I think, and I also see this going to happen more so across products, across different industries, different verticals, and that's what the future is. Cool. Again, I know you're a busy man, Steve. So before we let you go, any parting thoughts for our listeners? Especially a lot of our customers are in Asia, want to move into North America, whether you're a gaming company, a education tech company, any learnings while obviously you are doing an interesting work where US companies, you're taking them to Asia. Any parting thoughts for Asian companies who wants to go big in North America?
Any parting thoughts? I think the ultimate parting thought is, whatever methodologies work in either of the two regions, they're going to work in both those regions. Take the methodologies, apply them. Don't get influenced by latest trends in what third-party reporting may be suggesting. Do a lot of testing, but the methodologies are tried and true. I mean, and that's been our approach. We, despite the fact that everyone thinks that, new products are entirely different, the methodology to growth really is always the same, right? Core analytics, understand what's converting, always take a performance-oriented approach. There are very few apps and products in the world that organically grow. Most are driven through very smart performance and architecting your growth environment in such a way that you have all the data to understand and measure growth, and then deploy the same tactics as you can. It's the same tactics that we're using in Southeast Asia as we're using in the US, just slightly different in terms of the content and the construct. But the methodologies and the environment and ecosystems that we're creating to help us drive that growth are exactly the same.
No, absolutely. I think people are the same everywhere. It's just that you have to keep that lens of cultural nuances and context, and the same methodologies work. A good story travels very well irrespective of which country or which culture you're talking about.
That's right.
Great, Steve. It was a scintillating discussion and lots of interesting ideas around various UA strategies and how do you work a product from Asia to US or vice versa. So thanks for coming on our podcast. Lovely having you and enjoyed the discussion today.
Yeah, really appreciate it. Thanks for your time.
Thanks, Steve.
Take care, guys.
Thank you, Steven and Ankit, for joining us today on this wonderful, insightful discussion. A lot of you must be intrigued by the mobile marketing landscape shaping up in North America and beyond. Stay tuned for our next episode of Mic'd Up with Mas. Signing off until then. Thank you.